It's almost December. Can you believe it?
Insane.
Unreal. Okay, Katie, we're just going to wait a few minutes here, but we should probably just get started. Since we have people already entered in, there's 5 people in the waiting room. We let them in and we get started, okay? Aloha, everybody. Katie Zuber, our communications chair, is here. And Katie, do you want to share something with everyone who's here tonight about HFUU in as far as their membership and or any information from the communications desk you'd like to share?
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. There are a lot of benefits to being a member of HFUU. This is just one of them. Joining events like this, we're all so happy that you're here tonight. Vincent Mina, our organization president, put together these pre-convention webinar tracks. This is week 3, and next week, can't believe it, next week is our annual convention. So December 9th to the 12th, if you haven't registered yet, go to hfuu.org to register. It's all by donation, so you only have to pay $1 to enter. It's as much as you can. We're very excited, lots of farm demo tours, webinars, and keynote experts chatting about important ag topics that you don't want to miss. And you'll also have access to this afterwards as well. You'll be able to watch the recordings afterwards if you buy a ticket. So check that out, and also make sure you're receiving weekly emails from us. If you're not receiving a weekly email from us, send me an email at hfuu@hfuu.org. I'll put that in the chat. That is definitely the best way to know what we're up to and what the whole ag world in Hawaii is up to. We try to keep you all updated on that, as well as our social media, HFUU official. That's all from me. I'm going to pass it off to Vince Mina, our incredible president, and thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Katie, and really appreciate you being on the call tonight. Katie is actually working from the East Coast right now, so really appreciate you staying up, Katie, to open us up tonight, and all the great work you do. A lot of this work within HFUU is altruistically done, and we have such an amazing crew of talent that is committed to our mission in creating and promoting vibrant and prosperous agricultural communities for the people of Hawaii and A. And, you know, we've been at it now since 2010. We are a chartered chapter of the National Farmers Union. That was quite a task to get that designation. And it was 11 years since that designation had been achieved by a state chapter. So we're really happy that we have that designation, because what it does is it gives us a voice at the national boardroom. And it also, there was a, before we actually had a vote at the table, I approached the president back in 2015 about having a committee on regenerative agriculture and local food. And he brought it to the board. He brought the motion to the board, and it got unanimous support. And there's 13 of the state presidents that are on that committee. And the chair of the president at the time turned around and said, and I want you to chair the committee. And so we've been having really great presentations. Every time I go back to the mainland physically, 4 times a year I go and we meet physically together. And at that region where we go to for these meetings is where I bring in presenters that are regenerative agricultural producers and practitioners, and also those that are involved in a local food movement. So this is a national movement that we are fortunate to be working on the platform with National Farmers Union. And this coming December 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th, we're holding our annual convention. Katie says it's next week. She made me a little nervous. It's not next week, thankfully, but it's close. Two Wednesdays from now.
Oh, a week from this Wednesday, sorry.
Yeah. And so we're going to be getting together and having all our chapter presidents at a retreat center in Hilo, Maui. And then we're going to have mainland presentations. We have a presentation from Belize, Colombia, opening up our mainland presentations. But then they also have Dan Kittredge from the East Coast, who's going to be presenting on a nutrient meter that he's developed, and which tests for bioflavonoids, antioxidants, and crop index on the path of creating a nutrient density meter. So I'm going to be getting mine soon. I had ordered it already and waiting for it to come. And Dan's is a bright light, young, bright light. He's only like in his early 40s and really taking on some big intention work, because that's where the rubber is going to meet the road, is when we can actually have a meter that we can test nutrient density with our food. So this way, you know, farmers, we may be foolish, but we're not stupid. If we can get paid more money because our food is more nutrient rich, farmers will embrace more regenerative agricultural practices. And in that spirit, for the past 7 months, since I sit on the Board of Agriculture, thankfully, with HFUU providing that spot on the Board of Agriculture, thanks to Scott Enright, who was the past chair of agriculture, he got a position for the Farm Bureau and the Farmers Union to sit on the board. And from that platform, I've been able to bring forward an initiative working directly with NRCS for soil health, that we have all the agricultural sector at the table. We've been in conversations now for the past 7 months. We're in the process of doing a demonstration. And I just posted something on our Facebook page about that. Tomorrow I give a presentation. If you want to tune into the Board of Ag meeting, Hawaii Department of Agriculture meeting, at the end of the meeting tomorrow, there's going to be a presentation on the soil health initiative that is being brought forward. So we're really excited about that because of the level of the exposure that it's going to have regarding coming out of the Department of Ag. We feel that we can gain some traction here throughout the state to make these practices more mainstream, to start the process of creating an agricultural system that has regional compost sites, that has cover crop seed industry to make cover crop seed available for our farmers at a lot more affordable price, and things of that nature as far as our strategies moving forward. So really excited about, you know, the steps that are being taken, that everybody is on board, that it's at the table, that they value soil health. So stay tuned for all that. In the meantime, for our convention, after our mainland presentations, we're going to have farm videos that we've just taken recently that will have the farmers there with us at the retreat center. We'll show these demonstration videos and then have a Q&A afterwards. So it's going to be quite a wonderful convention time. So please, like Katie said, it's a donation only event. So tune in when you can, and it's all going to be on Zoom. So with that said, I'm really excited about our presenter tonight. Actually, we have two presenters tonight. I woke up Irene Antoinette's from Prague, Czechoslovakia, to be with us again this week. She was very well received last week, and she just had a great time. And so I encouraged her to come back this week. And Ben Lillibridge, who's our presenter tonight, was all open arms about having Irene be able to be here and chime in tonight as she sees fit. And I'm even talking to Charles Tresteter and Hernan from our first week's presentation, and Ben, to see if possibly we could do a panel discussion at our convention on mushrooms with all these folks that have been presenting over the past few weeks. So Irene, I'll keep you informed on that too, okay? And to see if we can swing it for the convention that gets you guys all in a panel. So with that said, Ben, how you doing, my brother?
Hey, everybody. Aloha. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. And Irene, aloha. Good morning. Thank you for being up.
Good morning, everyone.
It's 5:11 there in Prague, Czechoslovakia. You look like you're ready to go out for play music or something. Not quite, huh?
Ready
But
to go to bed.
yeah. So Irene, just so everybody can know, in the chat, Irene's artwork and her music links are in the chat. So please check it out. She's quite the bright light, as you'll see, and as you can see. We really appreciate you being on with us, Irene. We love your artwork, and I've ordered some shirts. I'm waiting for them to come in. But maybe tonight you can show folks some of the artwork you put on shirts, and they'll order too, because I'm excited about getting mine. So Ben, please take it away.
All righty. Well, aloha everybody. My name is Benjamin Lillibridge, founder and fungi of Malama Mushrooms. We're a Hawaii-based superfood mushroom company selling everyday products that utilize functional medicinal mushrooms. Also the co-founder of the Hawaii Fungi Project, which is a citizen science initiative dedicated to the study of the mushrooms of Hawaii. And that's kind of the topic of my presentation tonight, is centered around that project, as well as just giving you all a little insight into mushrooms as a whole. There will be some pop quizzes during this, so just a heads up, we'll get into the weeds on technical stuff related to mycology. And I will say to respond in the chat box here. So hopefully everybody knows how to use that. And it will be, the prizes will be awarded to the first to respond with the right answer. Spelling is not, does not have to be correct. Anyway, yeah, without further ado, I'll just jump right into this. Can everybody see this? Or is it showing?
Not yet, Ben.
Okay. 1 second. There we go. How about now?
Yes.
Yep, can see it. Yep.
Amazing. Okay. So, mysteries of the kingdom. And the kingdom I'm referring to, of course, is the fungi kingdom. Mushrooms were actually thought to be plants until the 1970s. However, they outnumber plants 6-to-1. As of right now, we actually only know 7% of the world's total fungi population. And to be specific, that's about 120,000 species out of an estimated 3.8 million. So that's kind of why I refer to this as the final frontiers. Obviously, there's a lot we don't know about aquatic organisms and space, but fungi, as I'll outline here tonight, are very useful in our society for several reasons, from medicine to other things, and agriculture. And we really only have scratched the surface of what's here on our earth. Mushrooms can occur underwater, from land to sea. They come from the micro to the macro. The humongous fungus, which I'll show in a second, is actually one of the largest organisms in the world, and it's a mycelium mat in the mountains of Oregon. It yields the honey mushroom, but most of the organism is the mycelium, the root layer that's underground. They range from our allies to our enemies. There's bad fungus. Think of athlete's foot, that's a bad fungus. To allies such as, the everyday oyster mushroom you cook, or the yeast that ferments your beer. Most people don't know this, but mushrooms are actually closer related to humans than to plants. I'll actually show the tree of life here in a second, and I will show that direct ancestry. This is a pretty pixelated helicopter view of the mycelium mat of the humongous fungus I was just referencing. The area that's kind of looks barren is where it allegedly lives, because it actually is parasitic to the trees there. Again, they can be enemies. So this is a little tree of life just showing the fungus and animalia, which we are from, where our common ancestor is and how we're more closely related than the plants. So the first forms of fungus were aquatic, and this was about 2.4 billion years ago. It wasn't until roughly 1 billion years later that they made their way to land. And this actually predated plants. So fungus actually were the way that plants became land-based. Up until then, there was only algae or water-based type plant life, and it wasn't until they formed a symbiotic relationship or equally mutualistic relationship that they formed an organism that could share the resources and occupy the land. It's eventually created soil and gave birth to many other organisms being able to live on the earth. And then, of course, our last opisticon common ancestor, Loca, that I was showing before. We eventually split. We went on down our own route and formed who we are today and other animals, and fungus did their thing and created the kingdom that we know. A few 100 million years later, fungus took the form of Prototaxites, this huge 30-meter tall organism that was across the earth. This is a fossil on the bottom right of when it was eventually uncovered and studied. It turns out that being a 30-meter tall organism, is a little more ostentatious way to express yourself on the earth, and hence why it was probably since gone extinct. It was the victim of insects or invertebrates that found it easy to prey on. A few million years later, the first extinction event happens. Life renews. This is around the time dinosaurs walked the earth. Second mass extinction event happens, and that's when the stem and cap fungus took the form of a stem and cap, as we now understand mushrooms today. And this brings us to the present. So just a very high level zoomed out view of fungus and mushrooms and how they are where they are today in this beautiful form that we know. So quick mycology 101 lessons. Like I mentioned, fungi is one of the kingdoms next to like animals, plants, bacteria, etc. And they're heterotrophic, meaning that they need to feed on something to get energy, as opposed to an autotroph, like a plant that can create it from the sun. And they can do this by growing on things that are dead, which is called saprobically or saprophytically, parasitically, growing on things that are living, or symbiotically, which is a mutually beneficial relationship. And I'll show specific examples of that shortly. So the breakdown of the kingdom, after kingdom, we get into phylum. This is some taxonomy 101. Basidiomycota and Ascomycota, the two that are highlighted here, is where most of the things that we know as mushrooms fall under today. I break down the graphic here a little bit. So just these top two sections are anything you may have ever seen in your life live. Everything below is mostly out of sight, microscopic, lives in the ocean, lives in stomachs, very, very, not your day-to-day fungus. Here's some just pictures to break it down. And mushrooms can come in many different forms. We got bracket fungi, which is the orange ones there, that kind of grow like a shelf-like. They're hard. This is what a lot of polypores are. The stem and cap, as shown by the iconic Amanita muscaria there, the red and white polka dot one. And the bottom right, the jelly fungi, which we have some occurring here in Hawaii. And then you have, which farmers are unfortunately may know about, is the rust fungus and smuts. But the mushroom itself is broken down into categories like this. It has a cap, an underside, gills, which can also be teeth or pores. I'll show that in a second. It has a stem or a stite. The ring, annulus, and the vulva is only specific to some mushrooms like the Amanita, so that's not necessarily for all mushrooms. And then the mycelial threads, which is the root structure of it. The mushroom is essentially a good analogy is like an apple of an apple tree. It's just the reproductive organ. It's just the fruit of the total organism. The rest of it, the mycelium, which I'll show you pictures of, is in the wild, it's kind of out of sight. It lives either underground, intertwining with the root structures of the trees and plants and other organisms out there, or if it's decaying something, it will actually, like a tree, a dying tree, will actually live within the bark of it. Going along with the fruit analogy, instead of seeds, mushrooms actually produce spores. And it's ejecting millions of these at a time. They're microscopic, so you're not seeing it happen. But if you look under a mushroom that's been there for a while, you may actually see, depending on the color of it, it's a spore deposit around it. And I'll show a picture of that also. But spores, similar to seeds, will germinate, they'll form hypha, which hypha form mycelium. Mycelium eventually form primordia, which is like a baby mushroom, and then the primordia will form a mushroom. The mycelium, like I mentioned, is the underground root structure of the fungal organism going throughout the entire forest or just ecosystem. And it's a communicative internet web. It is actually, everything is kind of communicating through it. So like if the plants need more nitrogen spread through another plant, they'll actually send this via the mycelium network, kind of like our internet or a subway system. And within a single cubic inch of soil, there can be up to 8 square miles of mycelium, just to show how prolific it is. Here's a cool little diagram of kind of how the symbiotic or mycorrhizal mushrooms work. So the tree is actually photosynthesizing and creating sugars that it's sharing to the mushrooms or other fungus. And the fungus are actually kind of like miners. They're breaking down the hard rocks or soils and then sharing those nutrients with the tree and water as well. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a mutual relationship. Alternatively, there's saprophytic mushrooms, as I mentioned, which grow on dead or decaying things. Our beloved oyster mushroom loves decaying hardwoods, and also mushrooms that grow on feces are categorized under saprobes, of which we have some that occur in Hawaii. The underside structure can be gills, pores, or teeth, all of which are ejecting millions of spores at a time. That if you were to actually cut a mushroom and put it cap down on a piece of paper, unless it has white spores, it'll leave a spore deposit, like a unique thumbprint that, those are essentially millions and millions of spores that have just been deposited in the pattern of the cap. And this is useful for taxonomy or identification. You need to know the spore color to make a proper ID of mushrooms, but also cultivation, as all these are viable genetics to cultivate the species, not necessarily the same variant, but species.
Looks like Irene's artwork.
Oh yeah? Yeah, we got to get some of that up soon. And there can be white spores. So if you ever do this and it doesn't work, it could be that it has white spores, in which case you need black paper or foil, or it could just be that it's too old of an organism and is no longer viable in ejecting its genetics. All right, pop quiz time. Name the 3 underside structures of the mushroom cap. First one to answer gets $25 to Malama Mushrooms web store.
Okay, gangy, come on.
Whoops. And I can't really access.
Ashley Moody said gills, spores, and teeth.
That's correct.
All right, Ashley.
All right, we'll get your information and you will get some Malama mushrooms. Is the chat box on your guys' screen too?
Yes.
Okay, I need to get rid of that. Let's do that.
So Katie said to Ashley, send your email and she'll get it to Ben.
Okay. What is the other type of mushroom growth relationship? Mycorrhizal is one, and again, spelling's not essential, but we kind of need to know what you're saying.
So Tammy says saprophytic.
Bing, bing, bing. Nice.
All
Tammy,
right, Tammy.
you are the winner of $25 to malamamushrooms.com. All right, final question. Ready?
Tammy said that she wants to participate in the study of Hawaii mushrooms. So
Perfect. We'll be getting into that very shortly, Tammy. All right, final question. You guys ready?
Yep.
Oh. All right. What was the 30-meter tall fungi that occurred roughly 400 million years ago?
Give or take a million.
Yeah, give or take.
Okay, so Nikolai,
What do you say?
he said humo, Humo,
The humongous fungus. So that's
humongous. Okay, humongous.
yeah.
Fungus.
That's different. That's the one that's a fungus that still occurs here. This is
Oh, that's the one. That's the one in Oregon, right? That's
Yeah.
right. Oh, here you go. Craig said the big bugger, and then Nikolai said proxy mantis.
Close enough.
Okay, Nikolai,
All right.
way to go, Nikolai.
Ding, ding. Nikolai, you are the winner of $25 to Malama Mushrooms web store. Congrats. We'll figure out the logistics for all that after.
Well, that's very kind of you, Ben. Right on you.
Yeah. Gotta keep people engaged. Can't be sleeping on Mycology 101. All right. So moving forward, Hawaii. As I don't have to tell anyone here how amazing this place is, but let's just go over some of the details as to some of the reasons it is. So Hawaii is one of the most isolated island chains in the world. It has 8 of the world's 12 climate zones and has a super high rate of endemism, meaning species that are native here and only found here. And you'll see this in the aquatic organisms, insects, plants, amphibians, etc. Fortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of study of the mushrooms of Hawaii. Early explorers had made some collections in the 1800s, but it wasn't until the 1990s and 2000s that Dennis Desjardins and Don Hemis, who lived in Hilo, teamed up, and they got a grant from the National Science Foundation and wrote this book, The Mushrooms of Hawaii, which I think is coming backwards, but it's an excellent field guide. It's the only field guide we currently have on the mushrooms of Hawaii, and it's an excellent piece of work. However,
is it still in print? Is it still in print?
I believe it is still in print. It wasn't a few years ago, but I believe they were able to do another run of it. I could be wrong on that though. So all to say is there's a lot we still don't know about this, and that's why we founded the Hawaii Fungi Project, which I'll get into again shortly. So mushrooms in Hawaii, like anywhere, they can be endemic, meaning native and only found here, native, found here, but also may occur elsewhere, and native meaning found here potentially originally up until like the formation of the islands and the biological start of the islands, or introduced and invasive, meaning like recently found here. The distinction between introduced and invasive may have negative side effects to other species here. They can be edible, sorry, that's out of whack. They can occupy a variety of habitats, from invasive forests, you know, where we have like guava or something like that, to native forests, like, you know, ohia or koa stands. And kind of typically what you see is the native mushrooms will be in the native forest habitats, and the invasive, where there's invasive trees, you'll typically find invasive mushrooms, which kind of makes sense, but something worth knowing. And at this point, a lot of our native forests are around 3,000 feet in elevation. I know Hawaii Island, some of our only public access places to try to find these mushrooms is like Volcano National Park area. But yeah, they also come in a variety of sizes, and they can be edible, culinary, medicinal, poisonous, or more often than not, just unknown. Here's some examples of some of our tiny mushrooms, Rickenella fibula, some mystery Mycena species, and then Coprinellus disseminatus. This Coprinellus one is pretty often found. It's also known as the crumbly cap, or the the crumbly cap, because it'll actually appear and it'll disintegrate within 24 hours. So it's a kind of ethereal in that way.
And that's the one on the right-hand side, Ben?
The bottom left in the groups.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they grow in these big groups, but they'll only last for a second or for a day. And they can range to the large or own version of humongous fungus. This is an interesting case in Hawaii, because this is actually an example of an introduced mushroom, Macroscopy Spectabilis. It was only first found here in the past 10 years or so, for the first time. And we don't know exactly where it came from. We know it grows in Asia and Japan, and it's actually technically edible. However, it has been shown to bioaccumulate cyanide, so it isn't recommended to eat this. But all to say, I'm just kind of highlighting the diversity of size through our mushrooms that occur here.
Ben, where did you find the one that you're holding up in your hand like that? The two.
That one's right in just right above Kona town here on the Big Island. It was actually on my friend Dan Bolton's property, and luckily the landscapers were weed whacking and spared its life. And I had been wanting to find it for a really long time, or at least see it. So this was my first time seeing it. So I got a little trophy shot.
So it was growing in grass? Growing in grass?
Yeah, it was growing in grass. Yeah, I heard it's often associated with sugarcane, but the places every time I see pictures of it, it's always in a unique. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure its growing habitat, and it's something we're still learning about.
So that's all the same species right there, those pictures?
Yep.
Wow. So Tammy says it's found all over Kauai.
Yeah, I believe Kauai is where it was first reported, and now it's moved through to the other islands.
Cool.
Yeah, which is another interesting topic, is inter-island diversity of native mushroom species. Like we actually don't know, does this mushroom I'll talk about in a minute that occurs on Kauai, is that the same exact species that occurs here on Hawaii Island? We're not sure, due to the lack of work and study on this, but we'll get to that more in a second. We have many culinary and medicinal mushrooms that occur here, and I say culinary / medicinal is like, most often if it's a culinary mushroom, it actually has medicinal properties, whether it's good for cholesterol or immunity. That's why I make that distinction. But that bottom right one is actually an oyster growing on a coconut, which is a pretty rare find here, but find of a lifetime indeed. The top right one is Tremella fusiformis, and it's a good texturizer to soups. It's edible, and actually is really good topically for the skin. It holds about 1,000 times its weight in water, so it's actually used in was used in beautifying products for topical moisturizer, similar to hyaluronic acid. It's like a natural hyaluronic acid. The one on the top left, our local mycophiles will recognize, is Arcularia Cornea, or pepeao. I'll talk about that more in a second. And the bottom left is just a small snippet of a chicken of the woods, the Tipperas, which again I'll be speaking on shortly. So Arcularia Cornea is very interesting because it is the only mushroom that occurs here that we know of that has a native Hawaiian name, which is pepeao. Apparently, I was talking to a cultural anthropologist at Manoa, and he said the full name is actually Pepeao Akua. So ear, Pepeao means ear, and Akua, he said, it meant ear of the deity. So don't know exactly why it was referenced with a deity or deity, the gods, but it's not psychedelic. It is a delicious gourmet one. Tremella fusiformis, I just kind of chatted about that. Trametes sanguinea, this is related to turkey tail. It's this vibrantly orange polypore that occurs here. It's an invasive, so you'll find it at lower elevations and mostly grown on invasive woods. And the orange pigment in it is actually the same orange pigment that's in cinnamon, which is a very powerful antioxidant. And you can actually use it to dye textiles. You can make like a little orange dye. And it's actually been used in bioremediation studies. I believe it was pulling salt water out of, they used it to filter salt water out of drinking water. I don't think it was on a huge scale, so the industrial applications of it have remained to be seen, but definitely some potential there. And I'll talk more about bioremediation in a bit. Turkey tail, Trametes versicolor. This is an excellent immunity boosting mushroom that does occur here wild. It's also a polypore shelf fungus, so it grows like a bracket like that. And yeah, this is actually probably one of the most, it's pretty easy to find. However, there is a lookalike. Good news is the lookalike isn't poisonous, so it's there's no risk in finding its lookalike. And if anybody ever has any question on distinguishing them, I can do a quick explanation as to how, if you send me a message.
It's the underneath side, right? The underneath color?
The underneath side helps a lot. The pore, you look at the pore size, and then there's another feature. I apologize, I don't have a picture of the lookalike. That would have been really nice. But it's called Microporous Fineness is the name of the alternative of the lookalike. And micropore, you can think really small pore. And the underside does, yeah, it has almost like microscopic pores. But it also, if you were to pull it off the substrate, the turkey tail will be attached fully, like every part of it will be attached to the substrate, whereas the microporous, there's like a little black foot that's holding it on. It's it almost looks like a little, like, I don't know, crow foot. But Microporous Fineness, I can drop that in the chat after, and you can Google, you can see the little foot I'm talking about. Of course, the Ganoderma. Ganoderma is the same genus that reishi is a part of. We do have a Ganoderma, at least one that occurs here. What's really interesting about Ganoderma, the Ganoderma that occurs here, so for those that don't know, because I get to this later, is that reishi is like one of the most studied medicinal mushrooms out there. It has at least hundreds of studies on it, showing that it helps with like immunity. There's some clinical trials showing that it reduces fatigue in people that went through cancer treatment. Yeah, it just has a lot of historical use, but also validated therapeutic use. And we have some species that occur here. And at the time they wrote this book, and this is kind of my greater point of the Hawaii Fungi Project, is they didn't have the genetic technology to actually really confirm what these species are. Up until then, they could only identify based on what they could see with their eyes or see with the microscope, which we have since come to find is not enough. You need to do the genetics to really know the difference, because things could be identical based on what your eye could see and under the microscope, but be part of two totally different genetic tracks. So the two species that are in this book aren't confirmed. I believe it's Australe and Applanatum, if I'm not mistaken. But again, they don't have the confirmed genetics on it. So they could very well be native and endemic Ganoderma species, which would be incredible. I recently brought some of our native samples to a mycologist at UC Davis, who is like a Ganoderma expert. And she's helping on the project to sequence them and get the genetics on them to confirm whether or not they match anything in the genetic bank, gen bank, or not. And I'll just stop there for a second. So Tipperas, chicken of the woods, this is a mushroom that occurs pretty much throughout the world. I believe there's at least 30 different species, but from the East Coast to West Coast to the Midwest, and then internationally, this is a mushroom you can find reliably. It's obviously easy to see. It's also very delicious. Yes, it tastes like chicken. It has a lot of actually therapeutic potential too, and ranging from antioxidants to immunity, I believe. And again, this is a really interesting one for Hawaii. Is they did do the genetics on this one, and they did confirm that it doesn't match anything that's been found throughout the world yet. So that means that it is likely a native and endemic species. That's also something we're working on through the Hawaii Fungi Project, is taking the next steps to describe this species officially, give it a proper name, and bring it, just to the acknowledgement of the community in Hawaii and science abroad. Some mushrooms in Hawaii can be poisonous, or at least inedible. This yellow one is this is probably the most popular one people send me because it grows in flower pots. It's called the flower pot parasol. It will make you sick. The one on the right, Chlorophyllum mollibidites, is the green, I believe it's the green spore parasol, but yeah, it's a poisonous one. And these bottom two aren't necessarily poisonous, but they aren't recommended to eat. They're of the class of stinkhorns because, believe it or not, they stink. And it's actually, to its benefit, it attracts flies, which are essentially pollinating its spores. They land on it, get its sticky spore goo on it, and fly off, and they are propagating the mushroom. So, full intro into the Hawaii Fungi Project. So I had a huge interest in mushrooms, ranging from the general medicinal use of them, specifically cultivating them. I was pursuing that. I founded Malama Mushrooms in 2015 in a lava cave in South Kona here. Started as a farm, and years later kind of snowballed into a consumer packaged good company selling easy to use products. But my interest has always kind of been in science and taxonomy and understanding, we only know 7% of the world's fungus. So how do we learn more about what's occurring here in Hawaii? Because it is one of the most rare island chains in the world, and this has so many unique species that are just being ignored and at danger of being lost. So in 2018, me and my co-founder of the Hawaii Fungi Project, Jeff Stallman, who's a Hilo master's grad, we got a grant. We applied for this grant through the North American Microporous Project, which is dedicated to the preservation of mushrooms in North America. And the grant covered genetic sequencing cost for 50 specimens. We got a grant the next year too for another 50 specimens, so a total of 100 specimens. And we surveyed Hawaii Islands mostly, collected many dried samples, loaded up in PCR test tubes to send off for genetic testing, and collected a lot of data. This app called iNaturalist that I highly suggest everybody use. It's an excellent tool for initiatives like we were doing, as it can actually help. It can help the layman because it has a good AI that can help identify species, but it also geotags it. So that makes it just very useful for collecting data to understand, like, oh wow, we're seeing an increase in this invasive species. Like, all these people are finding it. Like, what's happening? Or, oh, we haven't found this species in many years. Like, let's check the data to see what's happening. So it's a really cool tool. And this is a tool that we partnered with them because they're affiliated with the North American Microporous Project to upload our stuff. So through that project specifically, like I mentioned, we exceeded 100 sequences because we partnered with the lab. Of those, there's 86 successful species. Like, some of those sequences didn't work, or they were repeats. We did multiple ones just in case they failed. We had 30 plus participants. We kind of put out the call to the islands of people that might be interested, and ended up having participants from obviously Hawaii Island, where we live, Oahu, and Lanai. This was via Facebook, iNaturalist, CTAR, and other conservation groups. And of those 86 species, around 50% had no genetic match. So that means either they were indeed endemic or just never sequenced before anywhere else in the world, which is possible because, again, mycology is pretty much ignored by most of science. You know, if you go to any university, you'll see big cement buildings that say philosophy and mathematics and biology, but none that say mycology. So it's kind of a, you know, again, it's a new realm. They're thought to be plants until the 1970s. So it's a lot of catching up to do, but nonetheless, this is exciting data because they could also just be endemic mushrooms found here. So now what? What is all, like, what do we do with this data? What's this project mean? So unfortunately, each species to like fully, you found a new mushroom species, that's amazing. But to like actually like do the work necessary to bring it to the forefront of science and give it a name essentially requires about like 1 to 2 years of devoted work. And to do that, you need more data collections. You have to find it multiple times to create collections, you know, different stages of growth from the small to the mature, get genetics for some of those. You got to look through the literature of related species to see how exactly it differentiates, both in the morphology, like the macro, like how it looks, but also microscopically, how do the spores differ? So it's kind of it's a huge undertaking. So we're currently, Jeff and I are kind of figuring out how we're doing this. He's pursuing his PhD in mycology and balancing this work along with it. So, and unfortunately he can't do his like thesis on this project. So it's kind of being run in tangent with it. So what we're trying to do, at least what my goal is I've selected 3 species that are kind of like, I apologize, that's out of whack. Essentially the low-hanging fruit. Whoops, bear with me. So I mentioned the chicken of the woods one. That one we already got genetics on, showing that it is a native and potentially endemic species. So what we did is we found a Tipperas expert in the world that is like categorizing most of the Tipperas and are sending him genetic samples for it. Same with the Ganoderma, I mentioned collaborating with the UC Davis one. And then there's a third one, an Inonotus species, which is related to chaga. So these 3 are just like my own personal interests because the genus has, you know, notoriety or popularity. Most people know about Ganoderma latiferus or Inonotus, high medicinal potential. All 3 of those have been shown to have medicinal constituents and have literature showing that in animals or humans they have benefits. And then easy to access academic collaborators. So I'm not an academic, I'm definitely a citizen scientist and a small business owner. So I just am partnering with people that already kind of know this world way better than I do to collaborate, symbiosis. So why should we care? Well, from a conservation note, again, just for the sake of preserving mushrooms and the rarest mushrooms in the world as we have here in Hawaii. So just looking at it as a whole, there's an estimated around 1,100 total mushrooms species that occur here in Hawaii. An estimated around 160 are endemic. And there's this cool calculator that tropical biologists use. That's for every 1,000 plants, there's probably 1,000 native plants, there's 1 native mushroom. I'm sorry, for every 5 plants, there's 1 native mushroom. And there's 1,000 native plants here, so it's around 200. But right now we found 160 endemic mushrooms. Most of them are lacking genetic sequencing. Like I was mentioning before, the genetic technology is relatively new. So most things in the Mushrooms of Hawaii book are based on morphology or physical characteristics of it, not its actual genetic code. And we already know that at least 8 of these mushrooms are threatened species. 6 are threatened, 2 are endangered by the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. So we already know we're in danger of potentially losing some. That could be to climate change, unfortunately, making the habitats for native plants that these mushrooms grow on uninhabitable, but also the increase in invasive species, which can outcompete the native mushrooms. These are examples of some recent introductions to the Hawaii Islands within the past few 10 to 15 years. So I mentioned Macroscopy Spectabilis before in the bottom left. That's a recent introduction. On the bottom right is actually kind of cool. Tammy, I think you said you're in Hawaii. I believe this one only occurs there so far, Phallus manipularis. It's actually bioluminescent. So yes, we have glow-in-the-dark mushrooms that occur here. Top left, Avalasio calicera is the orange pore fungus. This one's interesting because I see it pretty reliably whenever I go looking for mushrooms. It's always there. So whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, it's hard to say, but it's definitely showing up. So that's interesting. And then these Phallus species, which there's at least 3 that started popping up within the past 10 years or so. So, things are changing in the ecosystem. Again, is it good? Is it bad? Who's to say? Understanding the ecological ramifications of this is tough, especially without a lot of people working on this. Hence the iNaturalist app I pointed out and the strength of that. So why should we care though about studying mushrooms? Yes, conserving mushrooms and native plants is amazing, but like, how do you get the everyday person to care? So mushrooms have been shown to have remediation benefits. Mushrooms are the grandest assemblers of nature, right? You see them decomposing carbon in the forest, but they can actually decompose the polycarbons in plastics or gasoline, motor oil, pesticides, herbicides. They have been shown to break these down. So the industrial applications of the fungus, the metabolites they create, has really been yet to be utilized by our society. Agriculture, I mean, let alone just growing mushrooms for your community, but these things called AMFs, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which can be used in addition to growing plants, which I'm sure there's many people in the HFUU that know way more about it than I do, to help with like nutrient uptake in plants. That has only been yet to be realized. And obviously medicine. So all to say is like, we only know 7% of the world's fungi, and we have so much medicine, which I'll talk about in a second, but what's remaining in the 93%, we have no idea. And what's scary is, we could lose it.
Hey, Ben.
Hey.
Mitiku Hapte did a lot of work on ABS.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you may want to check that out. He's retired, but man, that was his focus.
Really?
And he presented at our 1998 soil health conference we had here on Maui. Mitiku Hapte. So yeah, you may want to contact the folks over at CTAR to see if we are getting his body of work.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely am a bit of a Luddite when it comes to cultivation techniques. So I definitely would defer to experts on that one. So yeah, I'll definitely check them out. I guess this isn't an accredited pop quiz, but who knows what is growing on this orange?
Mold.
Partly true. Anyone? Okay. It's the penicillium mold. So yeah, so quick context, up until the advent of antibiotics, which the first one was penicillin, troops were more likely to die of infections to their wounds as opposed to the wounds themselves. So infections, that was just the war zone, but like even in society, a lot of people were dying from infections. Alexander Fleming accidentally noticed that this piece of mold growing on his orange in his lab was outcompeting the organisms growing around it. So he thought, oh, maybe this has novel antibiotic properties. They took cultures of it, realized its potential, and I think the patent actually got buried for a while until somebody uncovered it around the time World War II happened, and they created it into a medicine, into an administrable way to get it to the troops, and the Allies were the first ones to scale up the manufacturing of it and deploy it to everybody that was overseas. And there's actually good history showing that that was partly part of our advantage, was that we were the first to really master, or rather like successfully deploy this to the troops. So what's interesting, again, this comes from a fungus which has essentially revolutionized the world as we know it for its medicinal properties. And furthermore, like heart statins, which is another pharmaceutical drug, have been fungi derived. But yeah, even aside from that, that's just kind of more like pharma focused. There's a lot of like folk medicine and traditional Chinese medicine and traditional cultures medicine that I'll get into. But circling back to Hawaii, this is an awesome native mushroom called Rotocolibial lalaha. Lalaha means, I believe it means widespread. And it was originally thought to be endemic, but they recently found it in Panama. So now we're not sure what came first, the Panama version or the Hawaii version, or perhaps they evolved on two separate genetic tracks. We're not exactly sure. But what's crazy is that a relative of this species was studied by University of Utah to have opioid agonist receptor quality. So it actually was pain relieving. So they specifically in this study used it for anti-itch, but it could potentially help with many other things. K-opioid receptors can help with depression, visceral pain, etc. We got a sample to the University of Hawaii Hilo where they did some preliminary antibiotic test on it. Obviously antibiotics versus opioid agonists is kind of a stretch, but this is just a pretty cool showcase of our project collaborating with local institutions to try to get some interest and study underway with these native medicines that grow at our feet. Yeah, I don't. That's kind of the end of the Hawaii fungi part. I know your guest last week did a lot of the medicinal mushroom stuff, so I want to make sure I don't repeat too much of what was already covered. But yeah, so this would be the section where I kind of dig into like reishi and lion's mane and cordyceps and chaga, these very well studied medicinal mushrooms and their benefits. But again, yeah, Vincent probably would know better than how I don't want to overlap too much, and also want to give space for our music and art guest.
Right on, Ben. And we're at 7 o'clock, but we can go longer if folks have Q&A. I'd like to hear from Irene, though. Irene, what is your impression here on what you see? I saw some of those mushrooms there that look like could be your artwork.
Yes, I've met some of the species that I've been drawing lots of them. Yeah, it's really inspiring, and it's so exotic to see something from Hawaii. Like here, it's quite different, and all the mycological stuff is different. Like, I don't know if it's better to talk later or now.
Yeah, different in what way?
I would say here, like, it's hard to find anyone not old-fashioned. Like, you know, it's more like the Mycological Society is very like backwards and very like strict. And even like when I was there with the exhibition of my fungi art, I think they were like, they really loved it, but some of them were quite shocked because like it's just they're so used to these strict illustrations and the science and everything is just must be the only way. And it's great to see, you know, how different can it be, and yeah, it's inspiring.
Do you have any questions for Ben?
Yes, for sure. Is it time for questions?
Yes, time for questions.
Yeah, let's break it up. I don't want to talk too much anymore.
Well, I think one of the most interesting questions for me would be like, how did you fall in love with fungi? It's always interesting to hear how you come to this.
Totally. Yeah, I kind of left it out. Yeah, I mean, my first introduction, like most people, was through Paul Stamets, you know,
Yes.
Uncle Paul, as I call him. I like saw one of his TED Talks on 6 ways mushrooms can save the world, which kind of talks about the way they can like break down plastics in the ecosystem and several other things. And then that was pretty instrumental. And then obviously, or maybe not obvious, but had a significant experience with psilocybin, which is the psychoactive compound in magic mushrooms, though technically all mushrooms are magic according to me. But anyway, that was
That's
pretty
true.
that was pretty inspiring. And then yeah, I studied environmental science and agriculture and just really wanted to focus on mushrooms. And no one was really hiring for enthusiastic mushroom guys, so I knew I had to create the job myself. So
That's lovely. Actually, my second question was about psilocybe species in Hawaii. Like, is there anything going on?
yeah, there is. It's nothing too profound. I believe it's an invasive species. It grows on cow pies. I believe it's Copelandia sinensis. I forget exactly, but yeah, I know a lot of people that have enjoyed it. I think it's kind of mild in terms of, you know, how the spectrum ranges for psilocybin, but
Yeah.
we also do have a very cool psychedelic, I guess, an initiative trying to create legal psychedelic access for people. It's called the Culinary Project. We're a sponsor of them, and we work with them. They're a very cool organization. So on the wild front, we got some stuff, and on the activism front, we have a little bit of stuff happening too.
Nice. And do you guys like, okay, might be a stupid question, but do you go like foraging in the forest? Like,
Yeah.
is it a normal thing for like?
So that's a really good question. So, you know, for someone that's been, if you've ever foraged, like, I always think about like maybe the East Coast or, you know, NorCal, Oregon in the winter, or like the Midwest in morel or chanterelle season. Like, people go out with like baskets, you know, and like I'm in Europe too. Like, you go out with baskets and you come home like stoked. In Hawaii, it's not like that. It could, and there's several reasons why. Like, you could be walking around for hours before you find one little thing, and that one little thing could be the most rare mushroom in the world. It could be an endangered species that you'll never find again in your life, but it's going to be that one little species. So it's interesting. You definitely need to appreciate the rarity of what's happening here. And we're not exactly sure why. It could be because it's like such young land, you know, like, you know, the land is still forming itself here as we speak. So versus like Europe and the East Coast, which is like, you know, some old land, and the fungus has had a long time to settle in. But yes, we do go to the woods. You know, the native woods are pretty far for us, like native forest woods. You know, we have to drive a couple hours, but yeah, we try as much as we can. We'll take you when you come out.
What?
We'll take
you.
Oh yeah. I actually had one more question, and it was about like your plans for the future. Like, what are the exciting things that you're thinking about for the future, and maybe also like, what is your advice on how to involve more like young people into mycology, and how to evoke this interest in fungi more? Because like here, like what I've seen, like there were almost no young people in this, like the Mycological Society, and it was like so old-fashioned and like kind of this very closed community.
Totally.
So yeah, I was wondering what is your like techniques? What is your advice, for example?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have any. It's lonely. Being a mycologist is lonely.
But
um,
fungi can be so fashionable, you know, even glamorous. Like for me,
yeah.
I see so much in them. Like I can't understand why others can.
Totally. Have you ever been to like a fungus festival of sorts, like Telluride Mushroom Festival?
No, like here in Europe, I don't think we even like. I think we might have one, but like there is not much stuff happening, at least so far.
Yeah, it is hard. I've gone to a couple, like the Telluride Mushroom Festival. For those that don't know, occurs every summer in Telluride, Colorado, and it's like a lot of the community comes together, and there's like arts and talks.
A dream come true.
And it honestly, it feels like if it's one of the few times I've been like with my people. It's like wow, it's all the little lonely mushroom nerds and nerds.
All the strange people.
Yeah, and they're all together. It's amazing. But yeah, I don't know, because we're still struggling to enroll, and like, you know, it's hard. Like I'm still learning so much, so it's hard to teach. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a whole lot, but as far as plans go, like just trying to work on for the Hawaii Fungi Project, I just want to like close out 3 species, like move forward at least 3 species, make sure they get names, and like I want to then explore them for their therapeutic medicinal potential. And one way we're doing that is like with our company Malama Mushrooms, which is selling products. We actually devote a percentage of those profits to the Hawaii Fungi Project, because it's, you know, there's no revenue for the science project. It's just doing science. So yeah, working on figuring all that out.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Ben,
and Irene, that's a very nice exchange. I really appreciate the questions. You're a natural interviewer, Irene. So Ben, as I shared with you, Charles Truster and I encouraged him to get on a phone call with me, and we spoke to the chair of the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, and because he wants to get mushrooms that are on the restricted list that shouldn't be.
Right.
And so I think through your project, that would be a really good platform to help bring this forward. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I actually have a picture of Charles in here. Let's pay homage to him. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think justifying some of like the medicinal stuff that it's already occurring here. There he is, Mr. Charles. I think, yeah, utilizing like, and what's interesting is some of the things I believe on the like banned list already occur here wild, which is like, you know, classic bureaucracy. But yeah,
bringing them in from the mainland. Yeah, they're bringing them in from the mainland.
Well, some, like I believe reishi, like Ganoderma is on there, but is on like a banned list. But again, like we have species that already grow here in the wild that may potentially be native. So there's just some like what's the word, contradictions, you know, within that list.
Well, just know that I'll get you in the loop of this as we move forward and get some traction on this. And then one other thing before we end tonight. Oh, good. I'm glad you got your website up there for people to be able to tap into. And I get your stuff now. I see your labeling. I buy your stuff. So
for real?
Wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the support.
So you know, one of the things that we were discussing is to potentially have a panel on mushrooms with you, Charles, Hernan from Desert Alchemist, and Irene during the convention. So it would probably be an evening session, like a dinner session or something. So let me work on putting that together. And you're open to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, Irene. Yeah, good. It'll be a little later in the day for you, maybe an hour later.
That's a blessing.
Well, bless your heart, Irene, for being up so early there in Czechoslovakia. But we know your love for mushrooms. And oh, Irene, you want to show everybody your t-shirts? Well,
I can show just, I don't know, a few things that I'm doing.
Yeah, why don't you do that before we end here? Yeah.
Yeah, let me just share the screen.
Yep.
Okay, so this is my Etsy page. And this is the stuff that I'm doing.
That's
It's
the one I
all
have
about
ordered.
mushrooms. Like
The chanterelle. That's the
Vincent
one.
loved this one.
Yeah.
Now this one I actually did for Mycological Society of Czech Republic. I have stickers, paintings, originals, prints, like this t-shirts, much love.
Um,
I got that
I
for Irene. I got that for my wife.
I even have a fungi swimsuit, but that's when I go to Hawaii.
That's right. There you go. All right. Beautiful. That's
Yes.
good.
So it's all about fungi and microorganisms.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job. And then,
Yeah, lots of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, that beautiful work. And so, so let's see. I will work to put that together and see if we can get a panel. I want to encourage everybody to make sure that you tune in to our convention December 9th through the 12th. Again, it's going to be a lot of fun. And all our chapter presidents will be here on Maui. So really excited about us being all together physically. And because we get a lot of work done and we inspire one another, get up in the clouds with one another, and then we go back to our farms into the trench of what we do, and in the hope that we could bring agriculture, local agriculture more robustly forward, you know. And it's a methodical and tedious process in this state we live in that only sees 0.4% of the state budget for agriculture. So we have to change that paradigm. And the only way I know to change it is to create an agricultural system that regenerates itself, recycles nutrients back onto the land, helps the farmers lower their inputs so they can actually make a living at farming. And then this way they can ramp up their production cycles and grow healthy, nutrient-rich food. Dan Kittredge's presentation on his nutrient density meter, don't miss that one. That's going to be quite a presentation. It's really great work he's doing. So a lot of good stuff coming. Really excited about it. But tonight was special. Ben, you know, really appreciate you stepping up and getting in here to so passionately share your love for mycelial world. And Irene, again, thank you for getting up so early.
Well, thank you. It was so inspiring. Thanks, Benjamin.
Yeah, thank you everybody for letting me talk at you for a really long time. I hope it was entertaining or at least engaging. Malama Mushrooms or Hawaii Fungi Project, those are my two projects, and stay in touch. Yeah, much love.
Do you have Instagram and Facebook pages and such?
Yep, we're pretty active on our Instagram at Malama Mushrooms, but
At Malama Mushroom, okay. And is the Hawaii Mushroom Project up on social media too, or?
Yeah, we're not active on it yet, but our website is there, and you can join our email list. One day, hopefully, we're updating you with exciting team forays or news. But yeah, right now we're pretty much just kind of in our own little work chambers, trying to get stuff done before doing too much with the community. But yeah, one day we'll be a little more active with everyone.
Great, wonderful. And just as a final note, you were talking about above Kona. I visited the sandalwood forest up there. A friend of mine,
No way.
who's extracting the dead sandalwood trees, getting the sandalwood oil. And it's amazing to see when he takes out the dead trees and there's still all that oil in it that he extracts, all the saplings come up. And it's actually reforesting the sandalwood forest by doing that, by culling the dead trees out. So it's really great work. And, every clear drop of water in this muddy pond is bringing us forward, to clear out the pond at some point. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, I see there's one question left unanswered. Craig asked, how do you treat a mango tree with saprophytic mushroom growth without harming the tree? It's a good question, Craig. I'm not much of I don't know much about like saving trees necessarily, but from what I know about mushrooms is if the mushroom's already taken hold of it, I think the tree is already kind of on its way out. It's probably, it's already a bit parasitized. I don't know if there's a solution for that. Hopefully it's a useful mushroom though. You feel free to send me a picture and maybe you just got a new crop on your hands, but apologies for the loss of the potential mango tree, and I guess it's the circle of life, but yeah, no problem.
Right on. Great answer. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Those that hung in there, thank you for being here. And tomorrow night is Doug Fine going to moderate the panel on hemp. So last week's hemp presentation with Gail Baber moderating went over 2 hours. There was a lot of information shared, and so really passionate. We have a passionate crowd here in Hawaii, and rightfully so, because of all the hemp products that are coming into Hawaii, and yet we can't have our producers be able to process their hemp into CBD products on their own farms. It's ridiculous, So we're working on at the legislative level too to address that. There's just so much to do. I started all this with a full head of hair, and we gotta keep your hair, Ben. Don't get too stressed about it all. But thank you again, everybody, and remember, stay positive and test negative. Okay, you be well. And Irene, have a wonderful day in Prague.
Thank you.
Namaste aloha.
Thank you,
Have a
everybody.
wonderful evening. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.